Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson. We're carrying on with portraits like the rest of this term. We've got one more lesson left next week. And this time we're approaching it slightly differently. So last week we were looking at structure, and the previous few weeks we spent sort of just working in a single portrait. And I just want to sort of help you approach it from lots of different angles. And today we're going to be doing another negative space exercise. So there's one negative space exercise I did already, which was a kind of a subtraction exercise where we had a black or a darkened sheet, darkened with charcoal, and we kind of subtracted into it. And this week we're going to be kind of doing more of a shape-based exercise. So I'm going to put my reference alongside. It's just a photo, like a portrait photo that I got off Unsplash, which is a good source for royalty-free images. And I chose it because the figure is darkly lit, and he's lit against a dark background. And what we're going to be doing is basically going to be plotting out sort of two rectangles. So you'll see in the reference, right down the bottom, you have this kind of V meeting where his neckline is, or the bottom of his neckline. And then I've just cropped up the top of the head because the hair is dark, because I don't quite want the two shapes and the two dark shapes on either side to meet. And they're just going to be bridged by his glasses. They connect the two shapes. But primarily what we're going to get is one left-hand shape, one right-hand shape. And they're just going to be linked by those 2 points, so down the bottom of the shirt, where the neck meets the shirt, and the glasses. And we're just working with two tones. So I'm not going to work too huge. Don't want it to be overly... zoom in a bit actually, so that I don't have to work so large. So if I make my box about approximately that large, so I'm just going to adjust my camera to suit. About crisp, yeah, it's not too bad. Yes, let's mark out the left hand side of this box. So I've just eyeballed the size of it. We're not going to do any measuring today, it's just going to be just working with your eye sort of exercise. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend using this as a way that you would exclusively create a drawing, though you could, but generally it's a good exercise just for really training that idea of being able to divide light and dark shapes within your drawings and paintings, because that's what creates the structure that we need. So let's work on this left hand side shape first. And if I look at the bottom, we look at the bottom of the reference, we know that if this is let's mark in our center lines, just eyeballing it. So we know that the kind of point of the neck where those two, the left hand and the right hand shape meets, it's kind of just inside the center line. Now the very top part of the shape is pretty similar, maybe just about here, a little bit inside. So all I'm concerned about, I'm really not thinking about what's going on in the face. I'm just thinking about this single dark shape that I'm working on the left hand side. I'm just staring at it and trying to abstract it in my head basically, and that's what you guys want to be doing as well. So we can start it going up that way. We've got a little bit that kind of almost like a little rhinoceros horn, so it's something else that you can do with this sort of exercise. If we say just inside the center, so I'm keeping my shape straight lines, straight construction lines, as we often do. So this is kind of like a rhinoceros horn that just kind of juts out of that left-hand shape, and then we've got kind of like a snout that drops down, call it a snout. So the main thing here is I'm not thinking about this as a face at all. I'm just looking at these shapes. I'm trying to focus on what they're doing. So we've got this, like almost like a little spear shape darting down. Kind of poking down, so if this is the horn sticking out of that head, I'm kind of imagining it a bit like a rhinoceros at the moment. So I'm just trying to get all these angles right. So I'm just thinking about the angles of this shape, just thinking about the shape, nothing else. It's a bit of a peculiar exercise, but it's really good. A really good way to kind of work on breaking your mind out of being too obsessed about what it is that you're drawing, which is such a pitfall when we're working from a real subject and we have all these preconceptions. So, fairly happy with that shape. If I start to shade it in now, shade just this side first. And shade it in lightly. Just to start to judge the shape. So it's not too bad. It feels maybe a little bit like this feels a bit thick, but we'll allow it. It's not too bad. I'm not actually working with an eraser today, so I'm just using it as a kind of just purely training my eye kind of exercise, which is what I want you guys to do as well. So that sort of horn juts out, then got this other little shape that sits on top, kind of angles back inside. Juts out and goes up and goes straight across and drops down. Another little kind of almost beak-like quality to this shape. So I'm just totally trying to abstract what it is I'm drawing. I'm not thinking about anything other than what does this little particular shape feel like. And you can do that when you're working on your own kind of general drawings as well, or paintings. If you get really stuck with a shape, you don't know what it is, just start to think about it like it's not what it is. It's just this little shape that has its own character. So that maybe looks like a little squirrel kind of perched on a stick, or a bird or something like that. I tend to find lots of birds for some reason everywhere. So then got another little shape kind of angling back, darting down. This is where they get particularly odd, these shapes. It's got kind of double shapes, but not going to worry too much about it. I'm just going to think of this as a single one at the moment. I'll connect it all up later. So I've got a kind of fairly lumpy shape, these little stripes kind of jutting in. You can see the outside of this shape, top point, sits just outside of that horn and just goes flat across, pretty much horizontally. Then make this the dark shape. It's a little bit tricky in this area. You can see it's a bit sort of softer. It's easier to define the shapes when everything's a lot harsher, but that's okay. In a way, you have a little bit more leeway. So let's go up to here, there, and we've just reached that top point, which is what we were aiming for. So let's isolate out this shape. We'll shade it up to about there for now, and then we're going to work on the other shape and connect the two. But I'm not going to be doing any erasing, so I'm going to go in pretty hard on these lines. My apologies if I've been blocking your view with my pencil. Just even that out a bit. Straighten down this edge. Because I really just want to define the outside edge of it. So I just want to really emphasize that this is just a shape in its own right. It's not necessarily anything connected to what's going on in the image. Just thinking about this as a shape, and that's all. So working back from the other side now. We got the next section or next shape that sits next to this one. So I can look across at some of the alignments. Use that as a kind of guide. This shape's simpler, so I'm going to keep it pretty simple. Kind of like almost a plinth that everything sits on with this one. Then a cut that kind of comes around to a sharp point, which occurs at about the level of the mouth. And then, so I blow my eyes and just looking at this really sharp point that comes into it. So I don't want to describe anything that's what we kind of recognize it as. Just thinking about this. So this is this point, wraps back around over the shape. Then we got this section here that kind of juts out and angles back. If we go back up here, this shape carries on. That angle coming back. Then this shape carries on up, then across, and again wraps up there and goes straight out. So we've pretty much got this shape. What we do first, we'll do the central connecting shape. So that's actually a bit thicker about there. drops down, back up. Then we've got another little jagged piece, sits out just here and drops down. And a few other little bits and pieces drop down into here, and that all pretty much connects those shapes up, so you can fill that in. So we've got our connecting shape in place now. Maybe should jut down a little bit more of that shape, about there. So now we can drop down, start to fill this in. And try not to go over too much actually, because as I say, I don't actually have an eraser. I want it to be clear what's going on. So just work a little bit inside this line to begin with. And I'll infill that edge. They'll connect pretty well. So one little last shape actually we'll put in is there's this kind of like little bean shape that just hovers in here. It feels a bit lost without that shape. So there we go, pop that shape in, makes quite a difference. You can probably put, there's a few of these little shapes. Inside this divot as well. You can start to fill them in. They're just little dark shapes hovering within the light. Once we get there, that pretty much does it for blocking in these shapes. But you'll see the way the approach works, I've not thought at all about what I'm drawing, so I'm going to go over a bit now what it's actually sort of culminated in. But when I was working on it, I was just really trying to put out of my mind anything to do with what was inside what I was creating with these negative shapes. So I wasn't thinking about whether this was a nose, what the glass was doing, what the ear was doing, just trying to focus on these two distinct shapes. And you will find that for a lot of references you come across, or if you're working from life, you just want to create these bounding boxes, because if I'd worked with the hair, I would have been tempted to separate the hair from the background or give the head a bit more structure. And I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to think about these shapes that surround the face. And yeah, I ended up with something pretty accurate to the subject, given I didn't do any significant corrections. So I'm reasonably happy with that. And sometimes you can start a drawing like that, kind of lightly, and then build over the top of it, and you end up with a complete drawing. But mostly it's a good exercise, so I'd recommend it as an exercise. So with yours, you just want to hunt down some kind of reference which is starkly light and dark, crop it down, or kind of isolate different shapes surrounding that white central object, that light central object, and yeah, block things in that way. I'll upload a sheet to the a sheet with some references to the blog and to the OCAD studio page for any students to have access to. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys next week for the last lesson of this term. As always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out our other videos. And if you want support from myself and a selection of other specialist tutors, just go over to the OCAD studio page and sign up. And I'll see you guys soon.